Hey guys, it's your girl Quinn here, and I'm back with a brand new video in the series TQ Cooking Tips for the Blind and Low Vision. In today's video, I will be sharing tips that you can use for frying and also some devices that you can use to make the process so much easier. But before we get into it, please be sure to like the video if you love the content, subscribe if you're new, and to turn on that notification bell to be alerted whenever I post the next video. Also note that the instrumentals for this video have been provided by Inner Sanctum Entertainment Ltd. But without further ado, put on your chef hats and let's get cooking. Now, frying can be very challenging for a blind person because it involves working with hot oil, hot food, and also finding a way to know when your food is cooked. But don't worry. Today, I'm going to share tips for frying with a pot and also 2 alternative methods that you can use to do it in a much easier way. But before we get into that, here are some general tips to use when frying. When frying, please make sure that your skin is properly covered as to protect it from any hot oil that may splatter. So for the ladies out there, you might want to stay away from those crop tops when cooking. Try to be as calm as possible when frying. Being anxious and jumpy can cause some very undesirable results in the kitchen. Also, as I mentioned in a previous video, make sure that you have all your ingredients gathered before you start cooking. You don't want to wait until the stove is lit before you start preparing what you're going to put in the pot. Never leave your pot unattended. Food can easily start to burn when you are frying, and it's best to keep focused on what you're doing and don't get distracted. Alright, so that's it for all the general tips. Now let's move on to tips when frying with a pot on a stove. Now there are various types of pots that you can use when frying. I personally prefer using a non-stick pot or a Dutch pot like what we have out here in Jamaica for frying. These will make it easier to fry your food as you won't have to worry about the food sticking to the pot. I also recommend using a pot with high sides. This will make it easier when flipping and stirring food and will help to prevent the food from falling out of the pot. Now that you have your ingredients gathered and you have the right pot, it is time to light the stove. If you have problems lighting the stove, you can check out the last video that I did in this series on lighting the stove. First, position your pot on the stove, making sure that the pot handle is not hanging off the stove. Now, if you're going to use butter to fry, some persons like to wait until the pot is hot before they put in the butter to melt, but this is up to you. But if you're using cooking oil, I recommend putting in the oil before you light the stove. This is so that you can use your sense of touch to ensure that you are putting in the right amount. If you had already lit the stove and you end up pouring out too much oil, it will be much more dangerous and frustrating to remove the excess oil because the oil will be hot. Once you have the desired amount of oil in the pot, light the stove and use the knobs on the stove to set the flame at the level that you want it. I recommend frying on lower levels so that you have more control over the food that you're frying. You don't want the outer layer of the food to start burning before the inside is cooked. But then again, you need to set the level of the flame based on the temperature that is recommended for the type of food that you're cooking and the method that you are using. This will take some experimenting at first, but you will eventually learn what level is best for what type of food. Once you have waited for the oil to get hot or for the butter to melt, add the food in the pot slowly and gently. Dropping the food or releasing it too quickly can result in oil splatter. It is also best not to put too much food into the pot at once. This is so that you can easily keep track of the food in the pot. This will be helpful, especially when flipping, so that you can keep track of the food that you have already flipped. If you have too many pieces of food in the pot, by the time you try to flip them all, some of the pieces may start burning. When flipping your food, the most ideal tool to use is a fork, a spatula, or some tongs. A fork or a set of tongs is good for flipping food that you need to get a good grip on or will not easily break or crumble, such as a piece of chicken. A spatula is more used to flip food that can easily crumble if handled with a fork. So this is foods such as pancakes. Using a spatula may still be a bit difficult when flipping some items though, as they will keep sliding off. A great alternative to this is to use something called a double spatula. This functions both as a spatula and a set of tongs. You would just slip one side under the food, such as a pancake, squeeze down on the other side, and flip. When turning food, some persons will use their finger to help hold the food so that it doesn't fall and to get it off the fork. If you're not up to this, you can use another utensil such as another fork for this purpose. These same tools can also be used to put the food in the pot and to take them out of the pot when they're finished cooking. Now, in order to determine when the food is finished cooking, there are various techniques that you can use. Some techniques include using a thermometer. Some persons recommend using a talking thermometer to check the temperature of your food to determine if it is cooked all the way through. Of course, you would have to be familiar with the required temperature for that type of food to be able to determine that. Using your sense of taste. Some persons prefer to use the fork and take off a piece of the food and taste it to see if it's fully cooked. Testing the texture. You can use a utensil such as your fork to test the texture of your food to determine if it's time to flip it or if it's finished cooking. Using your sense of smell. Some persons have the ability to know if food is cooked just by its smell. Using smell is also good to determine whenever food is starting to burn. So those are all the tips that I have for knowing when your food is cooked. Overall, frying with a pot is a process that takes practice and requires focus to get it done properly. Spend some time experimenting to find out what tools, amount of heat, and amount of time works best when cooking various types of food. So those are my tips for cooking with the pot and the stove. And I don't use this method often because I have two other alternative methods that I'm going to tell you about that I use. I only use the pot and the stove for food that I can't cook in these other two devices that I'm going to show you. But now that we're finished with the harder method, let's move on to two methods that you can use as an alternative to the pot. The first device on my list is an air fryer. What is an air fryer, you may ask? Well, this is a device that allows you to fry food without having to use any sort of grease at all. So you don't have to use oil and you don't have to use butter. Some persons may rub a little bit of oil or grease on the outside of whatever it is that they're frying, but it is not required. So an air fryer is a little electronic device that you can buy and put in your kitchen. There are various sizes of air fryers, but if it's just you can just get one of the smaller sizes available. I was able to get my air fryer for around $50 on Amazon. So there are a lot of good air fryer choices out there that you can find. You can search on websites like Amazon to find the right fit for you. Now, the way how the air fryer works, it comes with buttons that you can use to either start it or stop it. It comes with buttons that you can use to be able to set the timer on it and to also set the temperature. The one that I have also comes with buttons that I can use to set different presets for the air fryer, such as presets for frying chicken and other common foods that you fry. So the way how my air fryer is set up, all I have to do is to draw out the little basket or container that is there to put in whatever you want to fry, put it in there and put the settings on it, press start, and then wait for it to get done. Now, here is where you need to be careful when choosing an air fryer. The one that I have, I am not able to mark the buttons on it for starting it, for setting the time, setting the temperature, and all of that. That is because the buttons on my air fryer, you don't have to really push them for them to be pressed. I realized that as soon as I hover my fingers over a button, really, it presses it. Now this is unfortunate because I can't get to place items like a piece of tape or Velcro or so on each button so that I know what button to press for what. But that doesn't really affect me because what I did, I asked my mother where the start button was, I studied it, and whenever I put anything in there to fry, I just close it, make sure it's shut tight because it will not start frying if it's not shut tight. Hover my finger over the start button and just let it cook at whatever time and whatever temperature it's on, and I will check it periodically. But in your case, if you haven't purchased an air fryer yet, please be sure to purchase one that doesn't have the hover button touch so that you can easily mark the buttons. So that is it basically for the air fryer. And this is great. I have used it so far to fry things such as breadfruit, chicken, plantain, even fries, right? And it has done an amazing job. I've even used it to fry fried dumplings before and it was wonderful. The food comes out very crispy and awesome and crunchy. So you can easily fry items in it such as your bacon, your sausage, all of that great stuff. The only drawback with it is that you can't really fry liquidy stuff in it. But it's ideal for frying all the other stuff, so you don't have to be standing over a pot and having to be working with hot oil. So that's it for the air fryer. It's an amazing tool and I'm sure that you can find much more things that you can do with it as well. Now let's move on to the next device on my list. So the next device on my list is a convectional toaster oven. Yes, you heard me right. Not only can this fry, but it can also toast and bake. So a convectional toaster oven is a little small rectangular or square device that you can fit right on your counter. The one that I had was rectangular in shape. And of course, it's an electronical device. How it works is that you will open the little door just like how you would open the oven door on your stove. And inside of it, it has a rack where you can put different things to toast or to fry or so on it. And it also comes with a little pan as well, a little shallow pan. Both the rack and the pan should be made out of metal. Now the way how this works, well, with the one that I had, it had 2 knobs on the outside of it. Now this will depend on the brand that you buy, but I'm just telling you about the one that I had. It had 2 knobs on the outside of it. One for actually setting the timer on it and one for setting the temperature that you want the food to cook at. Now for me, these knobs were easier to use because all my mother had to do was to tell me whether the top or the bottom knob was for the temperature, and then she told me where each number was on each knob so that I knew where to turn it whenever I wanted to cook some food. Now this toaster oven is awesome. As I said before, you can use it to toast, right? So you can put your bread in there, set it on a little bit of time, and it will toast the bread. You can also make your sandwich, a whole sandwich, and put it in there on the rack and let it warm up in there a little bit or let it toast a little bit. So depending on the type of food that you want cooked, you will use either the rack or the pan. Now for food that you really need to grease or put them in some grease to be able to cook, that is where you would use the pan that it comes with. So like bacon or sausage or so. What I would do, I would grease the pan with a bit of butter or a bit of oil. Then I would put the bacon or the sausage or whatever it is that I'm cooking that requires grease in the pan. I'll close the door. I will put it on the temperature that I want it at and to set it on the time that I want. And it doesn't start heating until the timer starts. And once the timer stops, it stops heating. So once you play around with it for a while and you know the correct timing and the correct temperature for the type of food that you want to fry, you can even put it on and go and have a quick nap and come back to it. Even though that is not really recommended, but I can say that I haven't done it before. So I have used this toaster oven a lot. Trust me, the fries that you get out of this are much better quality fries than if you should fry it in the pot with oil, because that will be extremely oily. I would grease the pan and lay out all my chips in there, and with the fries now, especially if they are coming out of the freezer, if they're frozen, you know you would give something like that more temperature than other foods that you will be frying, right? So it's just for you to play around with the the foods to know and learn how to gauge the temperature. And as I said before, it can toast and it can also bake. Yes, I have baked a cake in this thing before. All I did was I got one of those little, like foil baking pans, mixed up the cake as per usual, put it in there, placed it in either the pan or on the rack. I think I used the pan because the first time I put it on the rack, it kind of, overflowed a little bit. So it's best to use the pan. Place that little foil container in there in the pan and set it on the time required for a convectional oven to bake it. And voila, you have a nice homemade cake. So this is just as good as the air fryer, just that it does much more than the air fryer because it can bake and it can also toast. So it's like a 3-in-1 device. Trust me, when it comes to frying, I hardly use the pot. I mostly use these two devices. Only on rare occasions when I have to fry things such as egg, you will find me using the pot on the stove. So that is it for my tips today on frying. I know there are many more tips out there, guys, but I'm not a professional chef. I'm not a robot. I'm not gonna know everything. So if you have some tips that I didn't mention, please be free to share them down below in the comments so that I can see them and so that others can see them as well. But those are all the tips that I have for you. Hopefully, they have helped you out and you can go ahead, use these methods in the kitchen to get your frying done. And also remember that you can find the two devices that I mentioned, the air fryer and the convectional toaster oven, on sites such as Amazon. You should also be able to find them in your local stores as well. But that is it for today's video. I can't wait to see your comments down below to see what you guys think about all these various cooking tips. But that is it. Please remember to like the video if you love the content, subscribe if you're new, and to turn on that notification bell to be alerted whenever I post the next video. Also, please remember to share it with all your friends out there so that they can stop being afraid of the stove and get right back into the kitchen and start cooking. Thanks again for watching. Remember that I love you and I'll see you next time.